If you're a fan of anime, you might be aware that not every anime or anime fan is exactly forward-thinking. Even if a character is very LGBT coded, some even going as far as to be confirmed to be LGBT, there's almost always going to be a group of deniers saying that it's just a friendship, just a phase, or it's just a localization, and not the original creator's intention. Being an LGBT person in the anime scape can be a bit disappointing, especially when I have many characters that I attach to due to their transmasc coding in their character, only to get responses from people telling me I'm wrong. There's a lot of series that are very forward about LGBT representation, but in terms of actual anime, it can kind of be slim pickings. And so it's really amazing to me that Dot Hack Sign, an anime from 2002, manages to have a pretty straightforward isekai plot, while also having an unavoidable LGBT connection to its main character, Tsukasa. I always thought how they went about writing this to be really cool, and I wanted to talk about it for a bit. I'm going to be primarily using he/him pronouns for Tsukasa in this video, for one in part because that's how he presents for most of the anime, and when gender identity issues are addressed, Tsukasa tells people to still call him a male. I think it's completely valid to use they, them, or even she, her for Tsukasa, despite the fact I heavily disagree with the she, her pronouns on a personal level. The way he's written makes it possible for him to be interpreted to be any of these, while still being LGBT if you're gonna make him a cis female because you enjoy the story being a sapphic narrative. I do hope that is most people that view Tsukasa to be cis females' reasoning for this, and not that people are transphobic, but I digress. I also want to note I watched Sign in English and Japanese multiple times, and while I do primarily rely on subs, I do know Japanese having studied it for years in high school and college, so I just want to get the thoughts in anyone's head that this is a localization change out of the way, since Tsukasa's gender identity issues are present in Japanese, and one of the biggest character focal points, and it causes for strife throughout the anime, so it's not just a one-off mention. Tsukasa is my primary focus for this video, but I'll also be going over Subaru for a bit, since I think she's a great example for the positive LGBT narrative Sign has formed. We'll go over her representation the further we get through the video though. Let's start with talking about Tsukasa. So, Tsukasa was born designated female with the birth name Anshoji. He had a good relationship with his mother and enjoyed watching old movies with her, like Roman Holiday. Early on in Tsukasa's life, his mom died and he was raised by his father. His father is an abusive man that put him through physical and mental trauma throughout the years, whether it was physically hitting him, neglecting him, mental abuse, his father did it all. As a child, he would go to school events with no one there to be with him, spending his days alone. And when he tried to nurse a cat to health, his dad denied him from seeing the cat anymore, likely dooming the cat to die. As he got older and started to develop in his body, his father refused him to take any feminine products like pads or bras. So Tsukasa started up shoplifting them from the store to take proper care of his hygiene. Around the time of him turning 16, he started playing the video game The World, and it becomes an escapism paradise for him. He creates a male wave master named Tsukasa, with the name taken from the G in Shoji, which I just want to note is a big trans move coming from the person making this video who's trans. Elio for me is just a masculization of my birth name, so Tsukasa taking his birth name and changing it into something more within his comfort zone is one of the first big notes on Tsukasa being trans I have. While playing the game, he comes across a tablet that grants him a power known as the Guardian, and it's eventually revealed that he can no longer log out from the world. Tsukasa, however, doesn't seem to want to log out. He calls the real world a ludicrous world, and that the world is his world. the world is a place that Tsukasa can exist the way he wants to exist. If he wants to talk to people, he can, but if he doesn't, he has all the means to be by himself and take in the world at his own pace. So, it's pretty obvious that Tsukasa has been through some traumatizing things, and that the world is a great form of escapism for him. Tsukasa just doesn't want to talk to people. He wants to go where he wants to go without dealing with people shoving their views onto him. But unfortunately, MMOs are called MMOs because they are a massive multiplayer game. So Tsukasa encounters other people that gradually care for or antagonize Tsukasa. He first meets up with the heavy blade Mimiru, who finds his behavior and manners to be irritating, to which Tsukasa retorts with, "I just don't like you." Yeah, Tsukasa isn't much of a conversationalist. Despite the treatment, Mimiru often finds herself thinking about Tsukasa and tries to warm down his ice-cold heart. The unfortunate thing for her is that road isn't very smooth. So, Tsukasa was given multiple things with that little tablet at the start of the anime, actually. The Guardian is shown to be the most attached to Tsukasa, seen as it's said to be a gift to him. The name is pretty to the point on what it does. It protects him. He also encounters a little mute cat named Maha, who appears and disappears whenever they please. I think Tsukasa understands Maha, but us as the viewers don't know what they say outside of a certain scream later in the anime. Maha could be seen as a bit of a pet for Tsukasa, and my theory on that being that as a child, Tsukasa saved a cat who then got taken away by his father. I think Maha was, in some way, formed from his memories of that cat. On top of those two creatures, Tsukasa has access to an area in the game no one else can enter. A foresty area with a lone bed, a teddy bear, and a girl floating above it like she's sleeping quietly. The area with that girl tends to be Tsukasa's safe space due to others being unable to go there. So when he gets in fights with Mimiru or anyone else, he tends to go there to brood next to the girl's bed for a bit until he gets bored, I guess. Because of these gifts, Tsukasa quickly becomes public enemy of the player-run guild called the Crimson Knights. They're a bunch of try-hard white knight types that hate hackers. The admins of the world are a bit inept, so the Crimson Knights tend to take on the footwork of administrating the player base despite them having no authority to. So yeah, players can't be furries in this game. So when people see Tsukasa hanging out with a cat, people quickly come to assume he's a hacker. When questioned about it, Tsukasa isn't the most polite person in the world, and the knights pursue him. The head Crimson Knight, Silver Knight, corners Tsukasa in a dungeon, and he kills the Silver Knight with a cool little coma attack with his Guardian that makes the player pass out for a few hours IRL. This does nothing but make the knights want to dox Tsukasa and freeze his account so he won't wreak havoc anymore. If you ever watched Belle, the Crimson Knights are essentially that one try-hard all-might wannabe-ass Justin. With Tsukasa wanted for dogs purposes, Mimiru tries to get closer to Tsukasa to warn him about his wanted status, but Tsukasa bends the knee to no one and just continues his tirade of running around wherever he wants. The group quickly gets expanded to include a few key players that are part of Mimiru and Tsukasa's clique that kind of becomes a community of supported online friends. So let's go over some of them. Bear is one of the other main people Tsukasa gets to know, primarily due to his friendship with Mimiru. He's a well-renowned author IRL who regrets being unable to take care of his son that grew up to become a gambling-addicted asshole that begs him for money in the game. This regret later becomes a part of Bear's desire to become kind of the father Tsukasa never knew. Bear can be a bit annoying to Tsukasa though, so without Mimiru around, Tsukasa tends to leave. Subaru is quite possibly one of the most important people Tsukasa gets to know in the anime, though her presence at the start isn't felt as hard as Mimiru's. She's actually a part of the Crimson Knights, and is actually the leader of it, but unlike others, she doesn't want to dox Tsukasa and just wants to get to know him better. She's pretty soft-spoken and is idolized by the Crimson Knights. Silver Knight especially. It's to the point that if she does things Silver Knight doesn't want her to do, then she's in for a world of pain later down the line. Crim is also a member of the Crimson Knights, or should I say ex-member. He and Subaru formed the Crimson Knights, but he soon left the guild since he stopped enjoying it with how preachy and doxy the group got. He still maintains contact with Subaru, partly because he's had romantic feelings for her for a while, and partially so he can be the voice of reason for her to kind of push her to express herself. He's a pretty cool big brother type, though his usage as a character in the anime isn't as well done as the others. Sora is another member of the crew, and he's an edgy 10-year-old with no friends IRL that plays the game to stalk female players for member addresses and PKs people, especially pretty girls if they refuse to give him their party invite email, so pretty accurate 10-year-old gamer rep here. Due to his loneliness, he comes to have an odd interest in Tsukasa and stalks him around throughout the anime. He also tries to kill Mimiro a lot, getting in battles and being weird to her when he sees her, and he kills the next character on the list a lot. BT is probably Tsukasa's least favorite of the crew, and that's saying something knowing Sora exists. She's a bit of a whiny bitch to everyone, especially girls. She says some really unwarranted things to Subaru since she gets a crush on Krim and also has a crush on Bear in the past, and I don't think she's quite over her crush on Bear yet. She's a bit jaded over her life and takes out her frustrations on anyone that crosses her path. She's probably the only one in the group that just plain has no interest in Tsukasa very much and is more a temporary party member that's only there to discover the key of the Twilight, which seems to have a connection to Tsukasa. There's a lot of people to introduce. While this kind of video format, I'm sure, doesn't give much of a feel for this group's dynamics, I quite enjoy them and find them to be pretty realistic, all things considered. The anime does an excellent job of fleshing out the cast, with each one tending to get their own dedicated episode. I'd say maybe Sora didn't really get an episode, but he gets plenty of characterization, not just from this anime, but also from the fact the player behind him becomes a main character in an anime and game series. What I like so much about this cast is not just how real they feel, but how it represents online relationships as a whole. It's hard to open up to people IRL about some of your secrets, especially if one of them might cause some troubles. Like, for example, if you're LGBT, if you open up to your family about it, they might disown you and hate you and not want to associate with you anymore. So being out in trans IRL is pretty hard to be. So not just in a fictional setting like .hack, but in reality as well. An online community of people to talk to about your struggles with being trans is an everyday occurrence for most trans folk. The anonymity and distance, funny enough, can make for one of the closest relationships you can ever find in someone. .hack has always done a great job in showing this, and is part of the reason I enjoy the series so much. But it's especially poignant in how this group treats Tsukasa when they learn he's not only in a coma in the real world, but also defab. I'm not gonna say the group was the most eloquent at learning Tsukasa's sex. They used she/her pronouns for Tsukasa and even cornered him in an area to tell him he's a girl IRL, which resulted, predictably, in Tsukasa doubling down that he's a boy, blowing up at the group, and leaving them for a bit. I never did like that part of the anime since most of the characters didn't really think on why Tsukasa is so adamant about him being a boy, but I'll chalk this up to this anime being made in a time where trans issues weren't really as known as they are nowadays, so it makes more sense for the characters to not really know how to handle this information. I'll say, though, that they remain supportive of Tsukasa, and after this incident tides over, they do go back to referring to Tsukasa as the way he wants to be referred to. It just sucks to see one of them remind him he's a girl, but I digress. Throughout the anime, Tsukasa gets flashbacks to reality, primarily relating to his trauma with his dad. The events of the anime work in ways to trigger specific responses from him, and it gets to be so bad to where he just doesn't want to leave the game anymore. During all this, the Crimson Knights are still going on their crusade to lock up Tsukasa, and eventually they do. I still think they do not have any legal grounds for what they do to Tsukasa, even considering the coma incident with Silver Knight, and a few other instances of him using his guardian on people. The Crimson Knights are still just regular players after all, but I guess the admins gave them access to a special area where they can lock up characters? And this area even blocks Tsukasa's Uber Haxor's power to warp out and go to his special place. Tsukasa understandably wigs out about it and gets depressed over his imprisonment. This situation seems to be the last straw for Subaru, who just wanted to talk to Tsukasa to understand why he lashes out at others. She sees Tsukasa in jail, and the two begin to form a connection. Subaru is one of the only players other than Mimiru that Tsukasa seems to be fine alone with, and she quickly becomes the person Tsukasa thinks about often on wanting to see or talk to. These events eventually coalesce in Subaru leaving the Crimson Knights, and goes into one of my favorite episodes in the anime, and how it's set up. But I'll talk about that later, with a bit more plot explanations to fill in the timeline. So, Sora rescued Tsukasa from the jail, which led to Tsukasa becoming antisocial for a while. Tsukasa suspects Mimiru to be with the Crimson Knights, and the reason he got captured. But Mimiru denies any involvement, and was actively trying to help Tsukasa. She sends a letter expressing her desire to meet with him, and gives him a meeting place that she'll wait for him for. An entire episode goes by of her waiting for him, where Tsukasa thinks she surely must have given up on him after that much time, and goes to the meeting place, only to be shocked that she's been waiting for him for that long. They quickly patch things up, and the anime starts to gear up for the revelation that Tsukasa is in a coma IRL. The voice at the area that only Tsukasa can go to eerily expresses joy at Mimiru and Tsukasa growing closer. But this isn't out of joy for Tsukasa to form meaningful and positive relationships, but more so joy at the fallout that will happen, and the despair Tsukasa will feel from becoming betrayed by people he thought he could trust. This voice is a real girl boss. The cast grows closer through some episodes that focus on each character, or give insight into Tsukasa's past of abuse with his father by having strangely well-related incidents repeat in the world. Subaru also seems to desire to get in contact with Tsukasa again, and joins up with Bear and BT as kind of the group that talks about Tsukasa, but doesn't seem to be in regular contact with him. During one adventure where Tsukasa actually agrees to form a party with Bear and Mimiru to go on a quest, we get to learn a bit about Tsukasa's IRL history with his mom and such, with the episode ending with a sequence showing Tsukasa's IRL body hooked up to a machine in a hospital, and his dad arguing to get him taken off of life support. What a great dad. The next episode begins with that scene where Tsukasa's dad actually unplugs his child's life support, and Tsukasa can feel the pain of him dying in the game until the doctors rush in to reconnect him. What the hell? Bear finds out about the incident in the news, where a report about Tsukasa's dad attempting to unplug his life support is reported. Bear believes the child in the news is Tsukasa, since at this point they know Tsukasa doesn't seem to log out, and it might explain some of the intricacies of the situation. So Bear looks into the person known as Anshoji after this. So, after the heart attack incident, Tsukasa runs to a secret place and finds it to be a bit fucked up. The girl floating above a bed in the area seems to be surrounded in thorns, and he asks the girl boss voice what's going on. The voice that calls herself Tsukasa's mother explains that since Tsukasa seems to be trying to leave when she wants him to stay, she punishes him by tying the girl down instead. She also talks about the Little Mermaid to Tsukasa, which, can I just pause for a second here? I don't know if this comparison was such a thing back in 2002, but mermaids have become pretty connected to being trans and a symbol for the trans community. I just find that a cool, fun thing to point out, since the Little Mermaid becomes a theme to compare Tsukasa to. Okay, unpause. Mother tells Tsukasa nothing good happens to the Little Mermaid, who turned into foam when her love married someone else, urging Tsukasa not to return to the real world. When Tsukasa leaves to go meet with Mimiru, she finds bruises on Tsukasa's hands from when he tried to tear them off from the girl, which I assume made Tsukasa compare his game self to his real self covered in bruises from his father's abuse, since he runs away after this back to the Hidden area. Tsukasa asks the voice that the real world is the surface world from the Little Mermaid, and that the game is the ocean. And that she meant to say he can only find happiness in the game and shouldn't wish to go back to reality. The voice says yes, and finally releases the girl on the bed from the thorns, leaving Tsukasa to stay there and cry. So, we're here to one of my least favorite narrative segments, and that's Bear's investigation into Tsukasa's IRL self. With no actual confirmation on Tsukasa being Anshoji, Bear tells Mimiru that he thinks Tsukasa is a girl IRL. At this point, there's a rumor in the game about the wish-granting item known as the Key of the Twilight, which everyone winds up on hyper-focusing in the anime. Tsukasa appears before them, telling them he wants to find the Key of the Twilight. When asked, he says he wants to open the eyes of the girl. They then go on an adventure to an area to find the Key of the Twilight, and all sorts of fuckery happens there. We get some plot with them meeting the creator of the game at the area they believe holds the Key of the Twilight, and he's just straight up the real creator inserted in the game, but seems to not be there mentally, just repeating a recording of him talking about his daughter, Aura. Tsukasa believes the girl that he mentioned to be the very same sleeping girl from the area that he goes to, and utters that he found the Key of the Twilight. This pisses off Girl Boss Voice, making the area glitch out, and sicks the cat on the group with a guardian of its own that tries to attack Mimiru. But Tsukasa pushes her out of the way and gets killed instead. We're now fully into the despair arc. Tsukasa's IRL self's vitals go to 0 on the hospital's monitors after Tsukasa gets killed in the game. During this, Mimiru wonders if, when a person who is in the game like Tsukasa dies in the game, will they die in real life too? I wonder if she watched Sword Art Online. Bear apparently looked into Anshoji, and despite that moment where he was considered dead on the monitors, somehow he comes back to life and is doing fine IRL from like a vital measure standpoint at least, since he's still in a coma. Tsukasa wakes up in another twisted version of the area with Aura, struggling to come back to life after being killed. The voice comes to him again, telling him she is his ally, and more gaslight gatekeep girl boss shit. This time, however, Tsukasa doesn't seem to agree with her. Probably because she just killed him? He leaves and winds up meeting with Subaru. Tsukasa opens up to Subaru about how he feels about the situation of being stuck in a game, how he can feel when he gets killed, only to be revived just moments later. He tells Subaru that he doesn't feel like he's really alive, to which she reassures him that he is, and that if he returns to the real world, she'll always be waiting for him, and that she's sure he'll be able to find the path he wants to be on. After their conversation, Subaru tells the others of the group and voices her concern that Tsukasa's mental state might get worse if he continues to have things like being killed or hurt in the game happen. Right around this time, Tsukasa asks to meet with Mimiru. Mimiru takes Bear with her, which winds up not being the best course of action since Tsukasa is more adamant about just meeting her. When they meet with him, Tsukasa has no memories of when they went to that area with Harold. Mimiru tries to hound him for an answer, but Bear intervenes, and so he runs away to the area with Aura. While Tsukasa takes a bit of a downtime, let's check in on Subaru, since this is where her character starts to shine. Earlier in the anime, Bear, Mimiru, and Tsukasa all have tried getting in contact with her by asking Silver Knight where she is, but he lied to them about her being busy. She confronts Silver Knight about his lies, to which Silver Knight doesn't apologize by justifying it by saying rumors are being spread about her to other members and that he's just doing what's in her best interest. Subaru talks to Krim about her worries, to which Krim basically responds with, "It's just a game, dog." Subaru returns to the Crimson Knights and finds them trying to capture a player killer and incarcerate him, like they did to Tsukasa. This pisses off Subaru, who confronts Silver Knight about his disobedience, especially after her sending an email to CC Corp that revealed he requested them to give the Knights authorization to view personal log data of all players. This is a breach on people's rights to privacy and is essentially dox material. Subaru asks them to go back to the ideals she had formed the group under, but is met with resistance from Silver, and she quickly finds that she basically had become nothing more than a mascot for the guild, with Silver Knight being seen by the other members as the real leader. Knowing she won't be able to change anything with her words alone, she announces her disbanding the guild. Queen shit. We get another Subaru-focused episode showing why Subaru formed the guild in the first place. It goes over her relationship with Krim and how she was a very meek girl that wasn't good at conversing at all, until Krim came along and gave her the courage to express herself. They decide to become the Crimson Knights as upholders of justice. It cuts back to reality where a member of the Crimson Knights tries to convince her to go back, but she refuses, saying they lost the values of her original intention on forming the group. She later meets a player with the same model as her who hates the Crimson Knights and Subaru especially, since everyone thinks she's a Subaru poser, despite her making her character before Subaru made hers. She tries to listen to the player earnestly, but the player winds up revealing she stalked Subaru with the intention of killing her, and posting about it on the BBS afterwards to humiliate her. Remembering Krim's words for her to have the courage to express herself, she stands up to the player, only for her to get her shit wrecked by the player. On the brink of death, Subaru walks around aimlessly until she bumps into Tsukasa. Shocked by her beaten-up appearance, he runs to her. Subaru asks why he's there, to which he responds with how he wasn't sure why, but he thought if he waited there, he would somehow be able to meet with her. She screams back to him that she was actually the one waiting for him, and cries in his arms. It's then that we learn why Subaru plays this game. Subaru is handicapped IRL, confined to a wheelchair. For her, the world is the only place she can walk on her own 2 feet. But, ironically enough, with her situation with the Crimson Knights, she seemed to be even more confined than her real self. This event starts the deep relationship between Tsukasa and Subaru. This episode really made me love Subaru. She was always a supportive character towards Tsukasa, but never was much of a moving force in the anime, mostly because of her involvement with the Knights and her soft-spoken nature. Now that the Knights are dissolved, her relationship with Tsukasa becomes deeper. More than anyone else, even Mimiru. They spend more time together, quietly enjoying each other's company, holding hands and confiding in each other their weaknesses. It's here that the romance between the two blossoms. I want to make one thing clear. Subaru is a queen that should be respected. Not just for this, but for how she treats Tsukasa in regards to his gender identity. Tsukasa opens up to Subaru about his gender, expressing confusion to her about how he feels like he's a boy, but everyone else says he's a girl. He tells her his fears about leaving the game to the real world, not just because of his father, but because he's scared for himself. He's scared of leaving the safe space he's created for himself. Subaru holds his hand and reassures him he'll be alright. I'll never forget her words when she tells Tsukasa her feelings of love for him. When he asks if it's okay to love him, since he's a girl IRL, Subaru responds with, I was touched by your soul. She loves Tsukasa for who he is. She doesn't love Tsukasa because he's a boy or a girl or whatever. She'll always love him for what makes Tsukasa Tsukasa. I always love that scene. In the next episode, Bear offers to take Mimiru to see the real Tsukasa IRL in his hospital bed, but Mimiru rejects the offer, saying she'll meet with him one day when he's better, and the two of them will go shopping in Shimokitazawa. Subaru tells Bear about her encounter with Tsukasa, which he approves of, thinking their relationship might help give Tsukasa the courage to leave the game someday. Subaru and Tsukasa wind up spending more time together since that encounter. Tsukasa comes to like her so much, feel like he can confide in her so much, that he decides to take her to the area with Aura and introduce her to the sleeping girl. When they arrive, though, the girl's missing. Subaru winds up running away from the area, feeling a sense of danger in it. She then meets up with Mimiru and regrets escaping the field. During this, Tsukasa's mother, the voice, punishes him for bringing Subaru, saying she no longer has a use for him, and does a move called Data Drain on him, the very move that actually made him comatose in the first place, leaving him on the bed, mind completely gone, and a broken shell. So, I don't know if the anime was intending this, but when she pushed him on the bed, the way Tsukasa responded to it made me think that maybe his father did something similar. with him screaming to make it stop. I'm still not sure if the anime intended that, but I did want to note that. The anime has kind of been having a bunch of comparisons between the voice mother and Tsukasa's father, and Tsukasa eventually does note this when he does wind up leaving the game by directly comparing her to his father, saying they're one and the same. So, just wanted to talk on that a little bit. Subaru becomes more and more concerned by the fact she hadn't seen Tsukasa at all since that day, and asks around for the group to relay any news if they find any about Tsukasa. For most of the next episode, Tsukasa is kept in a catatonic state, blankly staring next to the bed. His cat friend Maha appears to him eventually, and he gives her a blade of grass as a gift surprisingly, considering his mind state. This confuses Maha for giving her a gift, but she gratefully takes the blade of grass, known as aromatic grass in the game. Maha warps to the new area with the girl Aura that has warped into a twisted area, with the girl held upside down, seemingly about to be dipped into water. For the first time, we see Maha displeased, and wondering why Tsukasa isn't there, to which she has responded with that Tsukasa is no longer needed by the voice. For most of the anime at this point, Tsukasa is sidelined for the rest of the cast to investigate the world and what that programmer is related to that they saw earlier in the anime. They wind up all discovering that the voice that had talked to Tsukasa all this time had been using Tsukasa as an incubator of sorts for the programmer's child, Aura. The voice is known as Morgana Mode Gone. Her purpose was to give birth to Aura, but she gained sentience as an AI and realized if she gave birth to the child, she would no longer have a purpose to exist and get deleted. So she tried to find a player with a large amount of despair to use to corrupt the child Aura to prevent her from being born, or to give birth to an imperfect Aura, which means she would still have a purpose to exist. Since the voice can't actually kill her, she has to use someone else to corrupt her. Tsukasa was the perfect fit for a person to use to experience despair. With his history with his father, his antisocial personality, his struggles with gender identity, and eagerness for escapism, it was perfect for her plan. The group decides that because Tsukasa was chosen for this role, that they should use Tsukasa in a positive way to give birth to Aura and defeat the voice. But since the voice is omnipresent, they're not sure how to do that. After Subaru yearns to meet with him, Tsukasa somehow snaps out of his state and regains consciousness. Throughout the anime, the crew get in contact with a hacker named Helba, who near the end helps them hack into an area to try to take on Morgana. The group all gets ready for the showdown, but Subaru is adamant about waiting for Tsukasa, and remains in front of the warp portal until Tsukasa eventually meets up with her right at the last moment. When they arrive at an area known as Net Slum that hosts garbage data, they find it full of corrupted clones of Tsukasa that Morgana has been attempting to clone him, so she can stop using the real Tsukasa, predictably because of him not following her plans throughout the anime. Tsukasa then gets caught up to the reasons for his meaning for giving birth to Aura by the cast. So a lot of stuff happens here in the anime. Maha gets their grass deleted by Morgana, they wind up dying. After they change sides to help out the crew, Sora gets put into a coma by Morgana after he gets on her nerve a few times, yada yada. But I want to talk about Tsukasa and Subaru primarily with this video, so do forgive me for skipping detailed descriptions on this stuff. Their plan has now made Tsukasa acutely aware that he needs to leave this game and go back to reality. And the cast now knows about his father and his history of abuse from that news report. Bear meets with Tsukasa and offers to become his legal guardian in the real world, coming to believe his real father will not take proper care of him, and Bear himself coming to terms with his past of not being a good parent, and finally being willing to take responsibility and take care for Tsukasa. He sees this as a second chance for him to be a proper father. With the support of his partner Subaru, with the offer of a safe home by Bear, and the overwhelming support of his friends to be there for him, Tsukasa finally makes the decision to leave the game, resulting in the birth of Aura and thwarting Morgana's plans. The anime ends with Anshoji having left the hospital, a bag in their hand, as they pass the figure of a girl in a wheelchair, The two slowly realize who the other is. Mariko, Subaru's real name, has their aide turn them back to look at An. The two raise their hands at each other, a gesture they did when they were Subaru and Tsukasa, with a smile growing on their lips, as An lets go of their bag, and Mariko wheels herself away from her aide towards An, the two tearfully running towards each other, reaching their hands out to each other. And that's where the anime ends. There's bonus episodes OVAs that were released, but they were mostly fan service that gave backstory for characters like Mimiru, though one of the OVAs is set after the anime and reveals Tsukasa to be going to school and to be dating Subaru IRL. Now that the plot for Sign's been, for the most part, discussed, let's go over the brilliance of Tsukasa as an LGBT character. Tsukasa is written in such a way that you just simply can't avoid the LGBT implications. You could see Tsukasa as non-binary, transmasc, any kind of variation. Like, that would make a lot of sense for Tsukasa and his struggles with gender. But even if you strip his gender struggles as Tsukasa was traumatized by their dad and once they got a good father figure they could embrace their femininity, and see Tsukasa as a cis girl, then Tsukasa is still LGBT since they're in a relationship with a girl, so that's a lesbian relationship. I personally see Tsukasa's struggles to be transmasc in nature, as I've noted throughout this video, but I do so adore the way the writers just kind of make Tsukasa's existence LGBT, like, no matter what, whether you agree with it being a trans narrative or not. You can't do that with a lot of media. And again, this was a 2002 anime. This was made like, what, 21 years ago? It's kind of really incredible. And Tsukasa's not the only one. Subaru herself, especially with her touched by his soul speech, implies to me that she's pan. She loves the person she loves, regardless of their gender or sex. She loves, simply because she loves the person. I find her character, combined with Tsukasa's, to just be beautiful story writing, and why I wanted to make a video about them. This story is about the struggles of abuse, the struggles of gender identity, the struggles of speaking up for yourself and standing up and doing what you want to do. Moving on is hard, but with a group of people that are a positive influence for you, you can move past the negatives and find something great. I also really appreciated its representation, not just from an LGBT standpoint, but from the standpoint that one of the main characters is handicapped. That was a form of trauma to be worked past for Subaru herself. They both had things they struggled with in the real world. They both had a reason for why they retreated to the world as a form of escapism for them. So, for the two to wind up together in such a way at the end is truly beautiful. I know a video like this probably didn't hit that as hard as I'd like it to, but I hope at the end of this, you see why I think this is such a noteworthy anime. It honestly helped me a lot to watch as a child. I watched this when it was airing on Toonami in the early 2000s. I struggled with gender identity since I was a kid, and found a lot of Tsukasa inside myself. I wasn't able to pinpoint that as me being trans until very much into my adulthood, though. I fell in love with girls and was worried about being a lesbian when I was a kid, until I realized, like Subaru, I just fall in love with people, not really because of their sex or gender, but more that I just love people for themselves. So, I always find myself looking back at this anime fondly, despite some contrivances I have with it, and think how great it was to have such an anime I could rewatch and feel a connection with in this way as a child. Anyway, thanks for watching! If you haven't yet, you should totally watch .hack Sign and get into the .hack series as a whole. While this is one of the more noteworthy LGBT reps for the series, it's not the only one, with quite a few characters confirmed to be gay, with even one of the games giving you the ability to marry boys as a male player. This series is also super respectful to people with mental illnesses like dissociative identity disorder, and one character in the series even has a tulpa that's handled pretty respectfully, I think. I feel like there's a lot anyone can enjoy about the series. It's also just a great series in general, with its narrative about the connections that online relationships have, and the merging of digital and real life, and on what really makes a person a person. I have heaps upon heaps of praise to say about this series, so if this video intrigued you to give it a try, please do! I also have a video on this channel where I read the AI Buster novel, which is a good one to get into if you just finished Shine, and I'm currently going through the first 4 games, which have a lot of connections to Shine, so do keep your eyes out for those as well. A special thank you to Goldie Other for doing the art for this video. It's perfect, and they're so kind to help out with that. Please do be sure to check out their Twitter for other good stuff. If you like this video and want to see more like it, maybe consider donating to my Ko-fi so I can eat more than a piece of bread today. Or just sub to my YouTube or tell a friend about it. Or don't, I'm not Morgana. Thanks for watching this, and have a lovely day.